are continuing our sermon series called Vanishing Grace, and I've been impressed by the congregation this time. Like, that was when we decided to do this sermon series. We're like, yeah, we'll tell people where they can get the book and all that stuff. Then someone donated 12 copies of the book. Those left instantly, and all this stuff. And I've heard from so many people that they've been reading the book, and they're really like, oh, this book's great. I'm like, I know, right? Like that. It's really good. So you guys have enjoyed it more than I thought you were actually going to, which is good. It's good because. Listen, we create these sermon series. There's no guarantee that people will like them, right? Like that's what we're doing. Although I was up in Daytona over this week, and we were planning future sermon series, and I will say this probably means they're all going to be terrible. But we planned from July all the way up through December, and there's some good stuff coming up. There's some good stuff. I can say that. I'm like, oh, this is a cool idea. I really like that. So you can ask me about it if you want to, but it's not necessary. Like that. But as we're talking about today, well, our kind of lead verse for this, and what we're kind of doing with the sermon we're kind of starting off big and we're allowing it to come small. All right, so then it'll fan back out near the end of it. That's kind of the point of today's sermon. And when we talk about it, what Nancy read just a little bit ago was this beautiful verse from Isaiah 52 that says, "How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news." The last time we used this verse was actually 2 Christmases ago, like a full year ago, and it was on Christmas Day, and it was all about the shepherds. Right, and these shepherds who are outside the city walls, and they're not allowed in there, and all of a sudden all these angels come up to them, and it's like, today is born to you in the city of David, a Christ Savior. You find him, in a manger. You'll find him there, and these shepherds who are outside the city walls at night go in, and they see everything that the angels said was true, right? And they look at it, and you can tell, and that they're just bubbling over with excitement. And it reminds me of this verse of how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news. Is that it's those shepherds, they look at Jesus born in there and they get so excited because they're like, he's just like me. Like the Messiah born that the angels sang about wasn't born in these temples of high places and all these palaces and all that. He was born next to cows and sheep and everything that they do. He's born like me, the one who has to be outside the city walls at night. And they go throughout the city of Bethlehem, and they tell of the good news. They tell of what they've seen, that Christ has come like them, right? And I love what it says about Mary in that story. It says that she's treasured up all these things in her heart. Like it's this beautiful story, and so when I think we think about spreading good news, about what good news looks like, I think it's sometimes we consider it like, what would actually solve my problems? What would solve my problems? So I think sometimes when we're like, oh, what would solve my problems is more money, right? It's like, I need more, right? I like that would really solve my problems if I could just pay. I'm on a fixed income now. I got to be able to pay all these things, right? All the price, eggs are crazy. More money would solve that problem, right? That would be good news to me. So we immediately make things kind of big, these overarching issues. If I could just get my kid into the right school, then I wouldn't have any more problems. I'd be able to bring good news better, right? If I could just marry the perfect person. I don't know if that's an issue in the room or not. That would solve all my problems, right? That would be good news, Or we'll look at things look at the strength of all this stuff. I love when the disciples are with Jesus and they walk into Jerusalem. They're like, look at these amazing, huge buildings. And this is 2,000 years ago. Can you imagine just walking down one of our roads, like them seeing the church building here or one of our homes. You know, I look at my home and it's an average home in Port St. Lucie. They're like, oh my goodness, look at how big this is. I didn't have to duck down to get through the door. It was amazing, right? Like that's what amazing buildings were over there. And Jesus is like, I'm going to tear it down and rebuild it in 3 days. Like that's over there. It's all these big things. Or we say, like, to solve my problems, I just need a bigger military so that we can shoot down more China balloons, right? Like if we could just do those things, like we could. And I love how we make Jesus into this mighty warrior that we want, like that's going to solve our problems. Now, I remember, I have fellow 90s kids in the room with me today. One of my favorite Christian t-shirts from the 90s was this one, and it said like the Lord's Gym on the back of it, and it had like a Rambo-looking Jesus, like with like muscle, like veiny muscles all over him, and he was like doing a push-up with the cross on his back, like over there. Does anyone else remember that shirt? Yeah, all right, Phil, you guys don't remember it? Phil, long distance, right? Boom. There we go. Yeah, like that. He remembers that shirt. Like, and so we have this like idea that like, oh, muscular Jesus, and we end up doing that to the story of Revelation. We're making where like his victory is going to be mighty and all that stuff. But actually, at the end of Revelation 19, you see Jesus coming in on this big white war horse, but he's already covered in blood, his own blood. That the victory is already there. It wasn't really a victory of strength, but one coming like a must. Oh, hold on, I'm getting into the sermon. You know, and we say, and I talked about it in the confession a little bit ago, if we could just live a certain way, if I could have a level of perfection, if I could have a level of righteousness, then that would solve my issues. You know, typically we think that to solve the world's problems, to bring good news, and we got to do it through these big means. But if we continue reading Isaiah, it has kind of a different outlook to it. It says, how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news, who proclaim peace, who bring good tidings, who proclaim salvation, and says to Zion, your God reigns. Like those aren't big things. In fact, like we often see Jesus doing those things, right? That he's going to the lowly of them. He's going to those with leprosy, those who are kind of the bottom in the fringes of society, proclaiming peace and good tidings to them. Right? These aren't the big things. These kind of seem like everyday things. He says very openly that your God is reigning and he brings salvation to all of us. This is what Jesus has done, that he comes and he saves us. And it's very, very good news here. But as we talk about here, so we expect all these big things, and it's coming down to proclaiming peace. And then in Hebrews, now Nancy, I don't know who gave you such a long reading. It certainly wasn't me. I have no control around here of how long the readings are. And it has nothing to do with me having a short one today. Like that's nothing with it, right? My Daytona trip for the uninitiated is we do all the readings then, so it's my friend Mark's fault. All right, it wasn't me. And so he put that one in. Exactly. Just like my father is perfect, like that. But in our Hebrews reading today, it's almost like it's giving us a picture of what this looks like, of what it means to bring good news, to proclaim peace, good tidings, proclaim salvation, and your God reigns. So when we look at the beginning of that reading, it says, keep on loving one another. You know? And then it says, don't forget to show hospitality. All right, I have a confession to make, because in my confession I make is because I'm a good millennial. So you other millennials in the room, I think you may understand this. On this hospitality one, this one's kind of hard for us because like what will happen is that Coley and I will be hanging out in the house, doing whatever. Then all of a sudden there'll be like a knock at the door or the doorbell will ring. And what do we do as millennials? It's like, oh, who's at the door? Do they know that we're home? Like that. Do they know the way home? Like, can we shut the blind? Will they see it if we actually turn off the light? Will they know if we're home at all here? Like, oh, like that's, I don't know. Like that. I have people that are laughing over in the corner. Like that's, like over there, that's my sin, I admit it. But it says, show hospitality. Be a good neighbor, right? You've even hosted angels without knowing it. Like that. Be a good neighbor. Love one another. Be a good neighbor. We continue going. And it says, remember those in prison. Now, in a couple slides, I have like a list of all these things listed. And in that, I write, visiting those in prison. And as I was practicing the sermon, I went, that's not what this is saying. It's good to visit those in prison. But look at what it says. It says, remember those as if you were together with them in prison. It's basically saying, hey, walk a mile in their shoes. Put yourself into their situation. It says, it doesn't even go to the big part of going and visiting them. That's good to go visit them. But just even remembering them, right? It's these small things. And it says, marriage should be honored by all. Like, don't go around gossiping. Can you believe her husband that he does all these things? Like, honor marriage, all of us. Help encourage each other in our relationships with one another, that we don't have to go outside of them. Encourage all of them there. And then the last one, it says, and keep your lives free from the love of money. And I was always amazed at this, because I quote that bottom part there. It says, God says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. I love that verse. I quote it all the time. And I'm just doing the sermon, I was like, oh, man, this is right after that money section. Like, how amazing is that? Like keep your lives free of the love of money. Be content. Why? Because God will always be with you. You'll be all right. You'll be all right. And if you notice, as we look at my list here with the incorrect thing at the bottom, remembering those in prison, but love, hospitality, being a good spouse, being content, remembering those that are suffering. You look at that, and it's all small things. It's all small things. It's all things that just narrow together. It's just love. It's just being a good neighbor. It's just being a good spouse. It's not like these huge things I got to go change the entire neighborhood for God or anything like that. But living in the kingdom it's all these small things that get planted into the ground. And I think you see this coming about when we get to our gospel lesson. And he told them another parable, that the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. Now, I want you to think about this. Sometimes we get so aware of scriptures that they lose meaning to us. They're like, oh yeah, the kingdom of heaven. Like, what is the kingdom of heaven? The kingdom of heaven is like the furnace, is like the embers of the creative force where God's abode is, as he said, let there be light. And it's flung out of the kingdom of heaven and created everything that we see, move, and touch. All those pictures that the James Webb Space Telescope is giving us, all as it stretches to the ends of what the light can see around us. All that is encapsulated and from the kingdom of heaven. And yet Jesus here is saying the kingdom of heaven is like this. Oh, dang, I dropped it. It's too small. I can't see it. It's like a mustard seed, right? It's like a mustard seed. It's like a mustard seed that a man planted. It's the smallest of those seeds. Yet when it grows, it becomes this large garden plant. It becomes like a tree, even. And such like a tree that birds of the air can perch in it. It becomes like a tree in such a way that we can rest in its shade, right? And this idea here is what Jesus does for you. Jesus does all these mustard seed things. He goes to the cross. Now let me talk about this. You're like, the cross isn't a mustard seed thing. That's a major cataclysmic thing. Is it? Let's talk about the cross for a little bit here. One of the things, if we know our history about Rome, is that Rome got scarily good at killing people on the cross, right? So much so that they did it a bunch. Not even in our own Gospels is Jesus killed on the cross by himself. He had 2 other people with him that day. How many people that day that Jesus died on the cross were also crucified within the Roman Empire? Hundreds? Thousands? How many people that month? How many people that year were crucified on there? How many people that they were so meaningless to the empire of Rome that they didn't even record their names? We're not going to come to the realization of like, oh my goodness, Rome, we found Rome's records. That's great. They're right here. Here's all the names of the peoples they crucified. These people were worthless to Rome. They were rebels. Right? And they had no problem. They were subhuman. That's why they were killing them, right? They did all that. It's the most mustard seed humiliating thing that is going on. It's nothing. And yet Jesus rises from it. It's almost like he's planted in this meaningless thing and rises from it. So much so that I dare say that everyone here maybe can rest in the shade of the good news of that resurrection branches. The good news of Jesus brings salvation. Our God reigns even through those suffering and death, even as we remember those that are suffering around us. It's not about what you have, it's how Jesus transforms you, right? It's how Jesus changes all these things. That he comes to you in the midst of the mess, in the midst of anything that you may seem meaningless, and he loves you and has made you his beloved child. It's good news. It's good news. So in the book, it talks about 3 things that this idea that comes from Christ, this idea that indwells us as Christians, comes and it changes us as individuals, it changes us in our communities, and it changes us in our societies. And if you watch the video this week, so if you come on Tuesday or if you come on Wednesday or Friday or Thursday, or you just want, it releases at 11 o'clock. Oh, it just released. It's 11:03 right now. Just released on the website. You can go there and you can watch the video and you can look at the study sheet. And in the video, it talks about this story. I'm ruining the video for you right here. It's okay. It's 20 minutes long. There's other things. But we see that. It's when the Great Britain conquered India, they looked out over there and they're like, all right, we need to affect this society. And what they did is they went and they're like, we're going to educate the top caste. Because remember, India has the caste system, and it starts off with kind of nobility and the caste, and it goes down into the nothings, down in the bottom, right? And they said, we're going to educate the top caste, and it'll trickle down. It never trickles down. And let's be honest, if you're on the bottom, with the trickle down that you get usually isn't worth getting, right? You get trickled down literally, right? And so it never trickles down there. And it didn't really work. But about 60 years ago, this group of Christians went in, they saw that same caste system, and they're like, let's go to the bottom. Because we're Christians. We're mustard seed people. We're the people who think we've been saved by the cross. And they went to the bottom caste, and they created these schools. They created these schools that are called, oh man, that's good. Where is it? I got off my Good Shepherd schools. The Good Shepherd schools all around there, and they train people in the bottom. And in the video, he talks about there's this one girl who comes up. And she's got poverty rags all around her. She's from this bottom caste. And they're talking to her, and they say that she's going to graduate soon. And they're talking to her, and they ask her, what do you want to be? What are you going to do once you graduate? She says, I'm going to go to university and I'm going to become a cardiologist. Very specific ones, right? A cardiologist. And the teacher said, she's the brightest in our class and she will get there. And the only thing I can think of is what impact will a girl from the very bottom make? What shade will she provide, providing medical care and goodness to those lower castes, right? That goodness that Christians who understand that Jesus saves and everything about us is bringing this beautiful news of the kingdom. And it affects us. We see how it affects communities, societies, and it affects us as individuals too, where we can see that we are good and valued. And I have a perfect example of this. Me. I'm just a mustard seed. Now, I know you guys are like, no, you're Pastor Cris. You're the best ever. I hear what you say about me. I get it. But I'm the son of a commercial advertising photographer in Atlanta whose business failed in the 2008 Great Recession, who has done real estate and now works for a company that you probably never heard of that sells cameras on eBay and Amazon, other places. But that's who I am. My mom has done the books for countless companies all around, and I'm from a nothing place. I'm from Villa Rica, Georgia. Does that sound important to anyone here? It should. It's where I'm from, dang it. No. I'm from Villa Rica, Georgia. But here's the thing. I may be from there, and it's a smaller town. Like it's a suburb of Atlanta. But if you walked up to the Publix in Villa Rica, Georgia, the Mirror Lake Publix, if you walked into there, which is just a mile from the house that I grew up in, and you went in there and it's like, I want to see the house of Cris Escher, the house that he grew up in. People would go, be quiet. People are trying to buy eggs here. like quit bothering people. We don't know who that is. You know? Like there's no one's going to go, oh man, Cris Escher, he's the best ever. He grew up right over there. They need to mow their lawn, but you know. But like that's, but like I'm not from anything. But I'm a mustard seed that has been planted. And I know in my life that there's been people that by some miracle through the idiocy that runs through this has been able to sit in shade and be cooled off on hot days because this mustard seed was planted. And I know through your own stories of how you've been able to be like that for people around you too. And I think that's the way of God. And I think it's good news. And we'll end right there. Let's say a prayer. Jesus, we thank you that you give us that shade on hot days. That you give us the cool drink of water. We thank you for the grace that you've given to us. And Lord, help us to continue to give that grace to the people around us, that they may too rest in the shade of your love. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. So thank you.